Thank you so much for coming on Automating the Chain. I'm so grateful for you joining as CEO of Longbow, and I'm also very excited to learn from you given your 25 years plus experience, having started in the US Navy, then IBM, then JDA, to now running after being Chief Commercial Officer of Longbow. Can you start off by telling us a little bit about you, why you're in this space, before we dig deeper and I ask you a few questions about what Longbow and your technology Rebus is doing?
Of course. Thanks for having me, T. I appreciate the background. I won't cover all that. But I've got a broad experience in supply chain from running global transportation networks and the manufacturing planning process at IBM. I ran sales and technology solutions for a logistics provider, and like you said, most recently, more on the software side at executive at Red Prairie and JDA. So it's kind of a culmination of supply chain technology experience that I joined Longbow almost 4 years ago and really wanted to bring the technology that we were developing, help commercialize it and bring it to market, because I think it's very exciting about what we can do in the supply chain and some of the successes we're seeing for our customers.
And from your perspective, what is the vision and mission of Longbow, and how did you guys come up with your technology, Rebus? Sorry.
Of course. The history of the company is traditionally a warehouse management, labor management systems integration company. We did that for a little over a decade. And those are very complex, very successful pieces of software. But what we realized was there was a gap in how data was being managed. So we founded the firm on a very strong approach to customer focus. And our mission is to redefine what's possible from a technology partner. So we view that as total transparency with our customers. We view that as access to everything we're doing. We operate in a very highly ethical manner. It underpins everything we're doing. So as we did very successful systems integration projects for over a decade, we identified that on the data side, though supply chain software runs the supply chain very effectively, there was a gap on how data was managed effectively. So our mission on our software side with Rebus is to help fix the way companies are consuming data.
And so if we step back for a minute, the supply chain industry is very vast. Can you tell us a little bit about which part of the supply chain are you actually automating? And can you give us an understanding of, imagine you're explaining to a customer right now how you would help them automate their current supply chain?
Sure. Said simply, we automate data management, usage, and effectiveness in the supply chain. That's what we're focused on. So I mentioned that supply chain software, as you mentioned, supply chain's a vast industry. The software that's written does a very, very exceptional job of running certain facets of the supply chain. So whether it's warehousing, transportation, demand and fulfill, manufacturing plan, whatever it is, there's software that runs those aspects very effectively. But management of the data generated by those systems is a very different approach and very different architecture. And those software packages are not really designed to effectively manage companies' data end to end. So what we do is we bring with Rebus what we call an end-to-end data management full stack solution. That's a lot of words, but basically what we do is we'll connect our software to the supply chain systems that generate the large data sets. We'll then extract it, transform it, harmonize it, put it in our own backend NoSQL database, and allow customers to have full access to an algorithm writing layer, visualization layer. But once Rebus is connected to a system for our customers, and we've done all the data management on the back end, customers can now view, use in a very scalable, cost-effective manner all the data generated by supply chain systems. Now, you asked us where we started. We started in the warehouse and labor management, so warehouse and labor optimization, but we've since expanded into transportation data sets, anything generated by ERP, time and attendance, and we're being asked to move into the planning side as well.
Well, the data and supply chain data and data analytics space is incredibly crowded. I mean, it seems like everyone's getting in that business, especially with all our entire global supply chain in a bit of a mess. but also in the last 5, 10 years. So can you tell us exactly where you differentiate in the market and what you're doing differently? And what sort of data sets do you have, in fact? That would be incredibly valuable to the supply chain managers, the chief technology officers listening in.
Right. So as you rightly point out, the data and analytics space, which I follow very closely, is a completely separate industry than the supply chain. There are hundreds of pieces of technology that get put together to manage a corporate analytics and BI strategy. But what we found is that those architectures that are built are very complex. And if you're trying to manage every piece of data generated by your entire company, if you're a $20 billion global manufacturer, that is an incredibly tall task. And what we found is that when you get down into the warehousing space, transportation space, even supply chain, it's difficult to get time and investment from corporate BI teams. So while they're working on 8- and 9-figure projects over multi-year horizons, we very often find in the supply chain that people are limited to their corporate BI solution. There's a lot of leading BI solutions. I won't name them, but behind the scenes, what they don't see is there's an entire architecture built behind it on how to transform the data, get it out of the systems, what database you're going to put it in, how are you going to keep it refreshed, how are you going to keep it harmonized. There's a whole host of things with how you manage data. So what we've done that the data management space doesn't really do effectively is, again, once you plug in Rebus, and it takes us a few weeks to set it up and harmonize the data sets, customers, once they log in via any browser through our app, they can access their data sets and do whatever they want with their data, write widgets, look at different algorithms. So when you manage all aspects of your data in one solution, you tend to automate that flow. We've seen with some of our customers that they'll get comparative quotes internally as they have to from some of their corporate teams with a leading BI solution. It'll take them 6 months to a year, and internally 7 figures for a project, whereas we can do it in a matter of weeks for, $100,000 or less oftentimes. When you approach data as an automated stream and you understand the data sets that you're looking at, there's a number of pretty interesting things you can achieve.
You preempted my question about time and cost, but I'm very intrigued as to now, how have you done it? I'm sure folks out there are thinking, but how have they managed to cut down the cost and the time it takes to implement? And the videos online about Rebus make it look very seamless. But how have you done it? How have you differentiated yourselves? Before we get into the actual AI and ML side of things.
Sure, of course. Yeah, there's a lot of, this is a lot of really kind of blocking and tackling from a managing a data standpoint. So there's, we can talk about AI and ML. But if you think about the history of the firm and the knowledge of different warehouse management, labor management, and now transportation management packages, even though corporations will treat data as a process and how I manage data, different software packages have completely different data structures. So by having a deep understanding of the source system that generates the data, we already knew a lot of the structures of the associated leading packages. So for instance, in one of our customer $5 billion CPG company, they were the executive that bought our solution used to own the corporate BI solution internally. So he had a good understanding of how BI worked and what you had to connect it to. He also knew there was a huge gap in their WMS, which was performing well in the warehouse, but they're not architected very well to write reporting against their own data sets. So when he understood what we did, we really quickly moved through the process. But what intrigued him was we already knew the data structures of his underlying data structures of his WMS. We'd pre-built a whole bunch of widgets, and he had a good understanding of how to actually write algorithms inside a BI tool. So what was quoted internally to him as a year-long project that was going to cost $500,000, we did in literally less than 4 weeks for right around $100,000, and they were on real-time data in about 2 weeks. So understanding the data structures and understanding the elements really is a huge differentiator for us that a corporate BI team or a leading BI solution isn't really going to bring to the table.
And that's incredibly fascinating. Of course, the FMCGs listening are probably thinking, how do I cut my costs down, and so the CFO doesn't, keep knocking on my door. So let's get to the technical pieces. How are
Sure.
you actually leveraging AI and ML? Where does it sit in your analytics platform? Do you currently have all visualizations, or are you using some of the state-of-the-art technologies out there?
We get that question a lot. I think we have a slightly different approach to AI and ML. First of all, machine learning is very difficult. It's a very iterative process in how you actually have to assess the results of the algorithms you're writing to improve your own system. So we get a lot of questions on there on machine learning, mostly in the labor management space, and how do we look historically at data sets and have the system continuously update goals and tasks in the warehouse based on historical performance and data. It's something that we're looking into. We haven't gotten there yet. We find that organizing the data and presenting it to our customers presents so many low-hanging opportunities that we're in the research phase of machine learning. AI, I think we have a different view on, because I think there's a great notion in the world of AI that AI is whatever hasn't been accomplished yet. Because there are great successful AI platforms in supply chain. WMS is one of the greatest examples. It has awareness of its surroundings in the warehouse. It makes real-time decisions that humans can't make. It's a great example of AI, but it's not called AI because that's really only future looking at what hasn't been developed yet. So WMS, robotics, we look at it in that we're really automating data in ways that people could not do, right? So if you think about Excel and uploading spreadsheets and things like that, once we've turned it on and we plug Rebus in, it's really doing that in automated fashion. And we can make recommendations to customers on how to better use their data sets and what they can get out of it. And we see different examples across their business in ways to create value, not just limited to analytics.
Well, let's dig deeper into actually real life examples. If you can give us a few examples of how your customers are actually benefiting from your recommendations on the Rebus platform. Can you just give us a bit of an idea?
Yeah, I normally go through examples that are different so you can get a flavor for when you treat data differently, the broad spectrum of things you can do. So one of our customers, a pharmaceutical distribution company, and the first thing we did when we connected, we tried to extract nearly 1 billion rows of data out of their WMS. And the first thing we identified is that there was a lot of data that was duplicate records, orphaned records. So we cleaned out almost 300 million records just by understanding what the field should look like. And the funny part of that story is they actually had 2 full-time database administrators on staff for a couple of years that didn't identify the issue because the WMS was working, archiving was flowing properly, but they couldn't really sense that latency in the WMS and performance was being impacted by unnecessary records in their WMS. So we actually increased the performance, reduced the latency by cleaning up some of those records. They also turned our system on to external customers of their own. We don't charge by user. We don't think you should. I don't think that's a good value of how you can assess data. So we provide unlimited users. They created a customer portal based on our application that the leading global pharmaceutical manufacturers now log in and see order status through Rebus. They were also able to provide, across a campus setting in their metropolitan area, visibility to real-time labor performance and orders coming through their warehouses. So they're able to shift labor across town and across campuses. They've calculated they increased their cost to serve by 21%, and they've reduced their labor cost by 9% in a matter of less than a year. So that's one customer doing 3 completely different things with one system.
So what you're saying is you give access to Rebus to your customer, and then all their customers get it for free.
Everybody can use it.
And so how do you track how much cost savings you've got, and how do you track that if you're this pharmaceutical company, and how can you also see how much revenue you're potentially bringing to them by reducing some of these inefficiencies?
You can. We did. So I'll go back to the labor question in a second, because I'm going to talk about the revenue that we get. We get a big question, cost to serve, all the time. So we have a major home furnishings and electronics retailer in the States that uses Rebus, and they wanted to build a cost to serve model. So again, once you get the data elements connected and loaded into Rebus, we work with them. So we grab data out of WMS, we run labor management for them in Rebus. We grab some pricing and cost information out of ERP, time and attendance, and a little bit of transportation. And we put that together, and essentially at the algorithm layer, once we ingested it, and we would flow that data on a regular basis, at the algorithm layer, we partner with our customer on how do they want to see cost to serve. So we wrote the algorithm, it's fully exposed to them, they can update it, share it, copy and paste it whenever they want, and visualize it, and we've built multiple visualizations for them so that now when they actually go run their cost to serve report in Rebus, it shows up in real time. They can cut it by cost to serve by warehouse, by customer, by product, and they're just kind of pointing and clicking and running it for the last day, week, month, year, if we ingest historical data. It's completely redefined how they calculate cost to serve for their customers and their products. On the labor side, I'll touch on that quickly. We've got another $1 billion or so food grower in North America that didn't have good visibility into their labor force and their efficiency. So they reduced each one of their shifts by 20%. Based on just visibility created from Rebus, not even actually implementing labor management, but how on a per unit basis, how is my team doing? And rather than going back and running back to the WMS and checking on what's going on, we just put big screens in the warehouse so they could real time see what orders are coming down, how the team is performing. And they actually paid the system investment back in 6 weeks, and they had over a 10x ROI on the system in less than a year.
And let's talk a little bit, speaking of labor, how many data scientists and how many product managers and how many folks are handholding each of your customers? That makeup will be fascinating for those who are, how much attention do you give each of your customers?
Yep, I would say we have, putting it in round, we have a couple data, I would call data scientists. I wouldn't say formally trained data scientists, but I would say experts in data structure and how to process the data and use it. We work very closely with our customers because different industries generate different types, different quantities of data. So if you're full pallet in, full pallet, I'm using a lot of warehousing examples because that's where we have most of our traction. But you're doing pallet in, pallet out, you're not going to generate as much data as you're working with a pharmaceutical company that does lots of doses, eaches, vials, things like that. So we'll have to understand with our customer the volume of data and if there's any nuances to how they've set their table structure up or anything like that. So we've got a couple of data scientists. We've got what I would call 3 product-focused experts that work with our customers as we onboard them. And then we've got a team that oversees the roadmap. So we have a pretty lean team. We've started to expand and enable some other partners to do implementation for us based on the volume we're seeing. But that's where we look at our expertise in existing data sets and then how we apply Rebus to our customer base.
And one of the theses of automating the chain is that technical leadership and the business leadership or executives of the world aren't communicating and or clearly enough. And do you think there's a way are you bridging this gap at all for the business executives and the technical executive community?
We're trying to. The most successful projects we see are when the technology team either introduces the solution to the supply chain team or the supply chain executives that are pretty savvy organizationally, I think effective and work across their organizations, very early on bring in the technologists from their own organization. What Rebus really is a merging of a data and analytics architecture designed to support supply chain functions. So we need both parties, and that is sometimes a hurdle when one party isn't initially engaged. But when the executives work together from the outset, we've seen very successful results. I mean, one of the top, I'll just round, 10 food companies in the world, they presented the solution to their CEO a couple weeks ago as one of their strategic technology platforms moving forward. But that's a very strong handshake between business and IT, and it becomes very effective.
Some of the, I won't name the company, but the leading enterprise in the world of logistics and supply chain has been acquired by one of the main conglomerates. And you can see that the CTO council meets every quarter, and then the executive community have to, or the operational community has to actually brief the CTO community, and vice versa. Do you see that there needs to be more of this collaboration in general within the industry so that everyone can essentially move along the supply chain and drive as much efficiency as possible?
I think so, but I think that data is a very unique industry, and I still think it's growing up. I think it's morphing. I believe that data should be owned by the business for the most part, supported by IT, but I believe it's a business asset that's generated by different systems to achieve different goals. Data is not just ones and zeros that you can do anything with from a holistic, enterprise data management application. It's just not what I think. I think it's very specific to business function. So I think that as we see the data industry continue to grow, I think you're going to see it grow and more. And that's why there's hundreds of solutions in the industry. I think you're going to start to see that consolidate. I think you're going to start to see business executives take a more hands-on approach to the data that their software creates and how they use it. And what I talk to executives about from a data standpoint is you really have to understand the architecture of the systems that are delivering your data, because without that, you can't identify where a gap in flow or latency of the data is. And if you're relying on real-time data, or you're relying on some pretty sophisticated algorithms on large data sets, you have to understand how that data is being processed to make sure it's clean and accurate.
And for those who are listening, given the time we have today, is there something you see, what has been the opportunity COVID-19 has presented for your organization, the industry, your customers, and your partners? That is something that is so important for those who are listening right now.
Well, with COVID, I'll start with an example and then I'll answer your question. With COVID, we, for one of the, let's just say, major health organizations in the world, they were partnering with a logistics company to deliver all their PPE, and we connected to a brand new WMS we had not before, essentially over the weekend. It took us 3 days. We just went and grabbed the essential data elements, plugged Rebus in, and gave real-time visibility to all the inbound PPE. Again, to the customer service reps at the logistics company, to the healthcare organization, anybody that needed the information had instant access to the information. So when we think about how we can use that data and how we stand these things up very quickly, it becomes pretty impressive what some of the organizations can do.
And just on that PPE example, was it predictive, where you can help those who are delivering the goods? It could have been the logistics companies or the army of that particular country. Was it predictive, as in you knew when the next breakout would be?
It wasn't predictive. It's essentially what we do is, as we're grabbing the data, it's not predictive. It's when we grab it, we can essentially show customers exactly where the data is. The warehouse, the distribution network, is a little bit more of a black box, and transportation that has transponders pinging all the time and tell you exactly where your product is. You've got to rely on any sort of data status changes that move throughout the warehouse, or inbound product, where you can get visibility to inbound product. So we find that there's tremendous value in providing real-time data to folks so that they can actually see where their product is. And again, we give them the ability out of the box to write whatever algorithms they want to write. We get asked very frequently about predictive, and candidly, like I said, we're researching some of those things, but we find so much value and so many gaps and inefficiencies just in how companies can't actually access their data, that we find a lot of what I would call, kind of blocking and tackling, low-hanging fruit of how we expose visibility to our customers. And I didn't answer your question, sorry, appropriately, from COVID, because I sort of lost my train of thought. On the COVID side, there has been a hyper focused on how do I get information about inbound materials, outbound materials. I certainly have capacity constraints. I might have to do product allocation to different customers. So having the visibility of where your inventory is absolutely essential. And it's very difficult for large global organizations to get a real-time snapshot of their inventory. And one of the things we've done is we've been able to provide side-by-side views and reconciliations of inventory in ERP, which is typically the master, but not reality, and inventory in WMS, which is not the master, but actually is reality. So understanding where your material is so you can ship it, allocate it, use it, is a gap that we're trying to solve. And we had some tremendous interest during COVID regarding the inefficiencies of real-time inventory visibility and management.
What do you think the market size of this, visibility in your inventory is? For those who are listening and thinking, my God, I'm either going to get into the warehousing space or the data space or part of the supply chain, how large do you think the market size is? And has it grown during this period?
Well, the market size has definitely grown. The market size is actually very, very large. So I've contracted a couple market analysis, said global supply chain analytics could be a $10 billion industry, which is a pretty large industry. The data and analytics space is over 200 billion between services, software, and hardware, and then the supply chain space is, however you want to count it, 3 trillion, not exactly in technology, but very, very large market opportunity that in any analysis I read, and certainly what I see from my own experience, continues to expand. It's not a finite market set. As as we generate more data and we come up with ways to use it more effectively, we're going to be creating new technologies. And there's an IPO, I think it was last week, was Snowflake. Some of the new technologies and how you manage data are just kind of flying off the charts, and the valuations of these companies are huge. I think the market is very large, and I think it continues to expand and will do so for quite some time.
So before we wrap up, I'd love to understand, and for those who are listening, are you focused primarily in North America? Which markets are you focused on, and where are you looking to go moving forward? I know you've got some fantastic team members who are focused on different parts of your different markets. Can you just give us a bit of an insight there? And where do you think the most growth opportunity is for your company?
Our strongest presence is in North America. We're having some discussions in pilots in Latin America. We have a couple projects going in Europe and expansion there. We've got some global evaluation discussions that we're currently underway with. So we kind of have an approach of expanding out from North America. So I think Latin America and Europe are next for us. We will always go where our customers take us and pull us. They're asking us to do more and more. We work with 4 of the top 20 global food manufacturers use Rebus. So these are obviously global organizations that we're having conversations with around what country makes sense, where do we go next. But to answer your question, we're heavily penetrated in North America. I think we'll move into Latin America next, and we have a couple projects in Europe, and we'll go where customers take us right now, because to proactively hit a new market takes a lot of time, and we're certainly seeing a lot of activity, and time is at a premium right now.
It is. It certainly is, and I'm so grateful, Alex, for your time, and thank you so much for coming and automating the chain. So excited to follow your journey and the predictive elements potentially coming on board, and your growth in Latin America and Europe. So thank you very much, Alex, and I wish you a great day.
Great. Thank you, T. It was a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you so much.